And now we've been to the 5,000. Now we're going to another feeding 4,000.
Right. Yeah, before we really get into the Bible, you think there's only one, right? You're like, there's feeding and there's feeding.
I think that a lot of people read these two and think there's a mistake.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
there's something wrong because.
Yeah. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, completely different people group.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see what's going on and seeing if the disciples learned the lesson. Right? It says, I'm reading from Matthew 15, verse 29. Yeshua left there and went along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, Lake Kinneret. He climbed the hill and sat down, and large crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. They laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed as they saw the mute people speaking, crippled people cured, lame people walking, and blind people seeing. And they said a bracha to the God of Israel. Surely it should be, we said a blessing to God. Right? Why the God of Israel? I know, random details, right? What we found out is that the feeding of the 5,000, okay, before we get there. If we look at the Sea of Galilee, it's the shape of a hop, okay? So that'll be north, that'll be south. Sort of from this point, on my right, your left, running around the back end to the bottom and covering up the south was a territory called the Decapolis. Okay? So a lot of the time, the reference when he says they're going to the other side of the lake wasn't just the other side of the lake. This was a completely different people group. Okay? Now, Decapolis generally just means the 10 Deca cities, polis, right? But who was in the Decapolis? These were Gentiles, okay? And some people believe that all the way from the time of Joshua, when God told him to cleanse out the land or to allow the people to leave, they didn't really finish the job. And with Romans settling and many of the other conquests, what we do is we get now to a group of people living in the land that are completely separate from a biblical identity. Okay, these are Gentiles. They've taken to this section of the land in the Decapolis, and this becomes marvelous in their sight when a Jewish rabbi comes across to the other side of the lake. They recognize him, take all of their sick, and remember, we are Rome. We have many different deities. We have hospitals and so on, right? As Cleopons. Another story for another day. And we get to this place of, we've tried to heal, we've tried this, we've tried our gods, but this rabbi comes across and they rush to him.
Because they've heard.
They've heard the story. We'll get to who tells him in a bit. But he goes over there and they run to him and he brings healing and they bless the God of Israel. Right? Through the healing, they get their eyes open to trust that their idols are idols. There is only one God. Okay? So this sets up, again, the miracle. Verse 32. Yeshua called his disciples to him and said, I feel sorry for these people because they have been with me 3 days and now they have nothing to eat. I don't want to send them away hungry because they might collapse on the way home. The disciples said to them, where will we find loaves of bread in this remote place to satisfy such a big crowd? Now, what's interesting about this territory is there were quite a few big cities
in the area,
but the disciples weren't exactly going to go to the markets there. Why? Because their markets were filled with idols. Send them away. What are we going to do? We can't exactly go and do
non-kosher foods.
Right. And, we don't want to also make the same mistake with lack of compassion like we learned the last time, right? He says, Yeshua asked them, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7. Well, this 7 is going to come up in which we're going to discuss it. And a few fish. After telling the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, made a bracha, a blessing, broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, who gave them to the people. Everyone ate his fill, And they took 7 large baskets full of leftover pieces. Now we had feeding of the 5,000
With 12 baskets.
with 12 baskets. Now we have the feeding of the 4,000, and there's 7 baskets with 7 loaves. What is he trying to tell us? If he was the bread of life for the Jew, he's the bread of life for the Gentile. Where do we get the 7 from? Now, some people will go, okay, well, that 7 is a number that deals with creation and perfection, God's perfect plan. Absolutely. But there were also 7 nations that Joshua was told that he was going to encounter when they came into the promised land. Did they ever finish their work? Not really. So what I believe this is saying is that those two, even though because of your disobedience, because you didn't finish the job, and now we're dealing with this scenario many years later in a different way, now we're dealing with Roman and occupation and all the rest of it, he says, I'm going to use this as a miracle to show the Father's heart. I'm the bread of life for them too. And he feeds 4,000 men plus women and children, and they pick up those 7 baskets. Can you imagine the confusion in the disciples' face? You're feeding them as well? You're healing them as well? Yeah, he's the light of the world. He's the bread of life. He's the one that we need to run to. And because of that, there's healing in his wings, there's provision, there's our daily bread, and it's because of his love and compassion for the people.
Not just for the Israelites.
Not just for the Israelites.
I'm going to just move.